A narcissist reflects only shadows. Healing begins when you reclaim your own light.
Have you ever walked into a room and felt your own presence fade, as if the air itself conspired to dim your light? Perhaps you've laughed, shared, or revealed a fragment of your soul, only to notice it vanish into an indifferent gaze, or worse, a gaze that mirrors only itself. There are moments when the heart whispers a warning, subtle but undeniable. Something in this relationship is not aligned with the life force of your true self. The soul senses a shadow, a disturbance, a quiet eclipsing of the essence that is uniquely yours. Imagine a mirror that does not reflect your image, but rather a distorted echo of another's desires, another's needs, another's hunger for affirmation. This is the psychic landscape of the narcissistic relationship, a realm where your joys and sorrows, your truths and vulnerabilities are often dismissed, minimized, or absorbed into the unyielding gravity of another's ego. The figure of the narcissist is not merely a modern social phenomenon. It is an archetype as old as myth itself. Carl Jung taught us that archetypes live in the collective unconscious, shaping patterns, behaviors, and destinies beyond conscious awareness. The narcissist embodies a mirror of the self, yet it is a mirror fractured, reflecting only vanity, fear, and unintegrated shadows. If you are drawn to this video, if your heart has ever ached in the presence of another while questioning your own reality, know this: you are not alone. Today, we journey together into the depths of the psyche to illuminate 4 unmistakable signs that you may be entangled with a narcissistic partner. But this is not merely a guide to diagnosis, it is an invitation to awakening, to reclaiming the sacred path toward your own individuation, the journey to your authentic self. Relationships, in the depth psychological sense, are sacred encounters. They are mirrors in which our deepest selves are reflected, refracted, and sometimes shattered. When 2 individuals meet, it is not merely a meeting of bodies or social conventions. It is a convergence of souls. And yet, when one partner is possessed by the archetype of narcissus, the relationship transforms into a stage for the drama of the ego. The ego, in Jungian thought, is the conscious part of the psyche, the persona we show to the world. While the ego is necessary for navigating society, when it becomes inflated, rigid, or defensive, it risks overshadowing the self, that deeper, authentic core of identity. The narcissistic ego is particularly dangerous because it seeks validation not in mutual recognition, but in domination, admiration, and control. In such a relationship, intimacy is illusory. Your feelings may be dismissed or manipulated. Your voice may be absorbed into another's narrative. The narcissist, unable to recognize the other as a true subject, reduces you to an object, a means to satisfy their insatiable hunger for affirmation. And in this dynamic, the soul quietly begins to shrink, adapting to the contours of another's ego rather than expressing its own truth. Understanding these dynamics is not merely an intellectual exercise. It is an act of self-preservation and spiritual awakening. By recognizing the patterns, you begin to reclaim your presence, your voice, and ultimately, your life. The first, and perhaps most painful, sign of a narcissistic relationship is the absence of empathy. Empathy, in its deepest sense, is the ability to perceive the world through another's eyes, to feel their joys and sorrows as vividly as one's own. It is the bridge between self and other, the invisible thread that connects hearts across the divide of individual consciousness. In the presence of a narcissist, this bridge is shattered. Your pain may be minimized, laughed off, or even weaponized. Your joy may be met with indifference, or worse, jealousy. The narcissist, trapped within the labyrinth of their own ego, cannot truly inhabit your experience. To them, you exist primarily as an extension of their own narrative. Your feelings are relevant only insofar as they serve to reinforce their self-image. From a Jungian perspective, this is projection at work. The narcissist cannot acknowledge their own shadow. The unhealed wounds, insecurities, and vulnerabilities, so they project them onto you. When you express anger, sadness, or fear, they may respond with confusion, denial, or aggression, because your emotions challenge the carefully constructed illusion of their invulnerability. Consider the subtle, insidious ways empathy can be withheld. A partner who ignores your attempts at conversation, interrupts your disclosures, or redirects every discussion back to themselves. Perhaps you have shared a painful memory, only to be met with a dismissive remark or a critique. Perhaps you have sought comfort in a moment of grief, only to find your needs unacknowledged. These are not isolated incidents, they are patterns, the signature of an empathic void. The emotional toll is profound. You may begin to question your own reality. Am I overreacting? Is my pain valid? This is the psychic erosion Jung warned about, the way the ego of another can overshadow your sense of self. But recognizing this absence of empathy is the first act of reclaiming your soul. Awareness is the lamp that illuminates the shadowed path. You begin to understand that your feelings are legitimate, that your experience is real, and that the fault lies not in your sensitivity, but in the inability of another to meet you fully. Healing begins with this recognition. The narcissist cannot give what they do not possess. Your task is to cultivate your own empathy toward yourself, first and foremost, and to seek spaces where your emotions are reflected, honored, and held. In this way, the absence of empathy becomes not merely a warning sign, but a gateway to greater self-understanding and authentic relational connection. The second sign is an insatiable hunger for admiration. Narcissists are endlessly seeking to fill an inner void, a gnawing emptiness that cannot be sated by ordinary connection. Their lives are dominated by the need for affirmation, accolades, and recognition. In conversations, your voice may fade into the background, drowned by a relentless tide of self-adoration. This hunger is not trivial. It is symptomatic of a profound disconnection from the self. The narcissist cannot access their own inner wholeness, so they attempt to construct it externally, through praise, envy, and control. Every interaction becomes a mirror in which they must see themselves reflected as superior, desired, or unassailable. Your achievements, joys, or insights may be downplayed, ignored, or co-opted to enhance their own narrative. Consider the subtle and overt manifestations. Your partner constantly seeking compliments, steering conversations to highlight their achievements, or reacting with resentment when attention shifts away from them. Perhaps they recount their successes with grandiosity, or lament their suffering in ways that demand validation. You may feel invisible, your own story swallowed by the gravity of their self-focus. Jung would describe this as the inflation of the ego, the shadow's desperate attempt to assert significance in the face of inner emptiness. This dynamic is particularly treacherous because it masquerades as charm, confidence, or ambition. The initial allure is intoxicating. Who could resist the charisma of someone who seems larger than life? Yet beneath the surface lies an insatiable void, a psychic hunger that cannot be filled by admiration alone. The emotional consequences are subtle but profound. You may find yourself adapting your behavior to satisfy their need for recognition, sacrificing authenticity for approval. Your boundaries may erode as you prioritize their validation over your own needs. Over time, this constant deflection of attention can erode self-esteem, leaving you questioning the value of your own presence and accomplishments. Recognizing this pattern is liberating. It allows you to reclaim your narrative, to assert your own worth independently of another's gaze. Begin by observing the flow of attention in your relationship, whose voice dominates, whose needs are prioritized, and where your own presence is minimized. By cultivating awareness, you begin the work of individuation, learning to honor your own story, voice, and achievements without seeking external approval. The third sign is the subtle, often invisible, web of manipulation and control. Unlike the overt cruelty of a tyrant, the narcissist wields control like a skilled magician, coaxing, twisting, and bending reality until your perceptions themselves become uncertain. Gaslighting, guilt-tripping, the selective telling of facts, all are tools to maintain dominance over the narrative, over the relationship, and, ultimately, over your sense of self. From a Jungian perspective, this is a defense of the ego against the unknown. The narcissistic ego fears the chaos and vulnerability that come with genuine intimacy. To face another fully is to face one's own shadow, the parts of oneself that are fragile, imperfect, or unacceptable. Rather than integrate these parts, the narcissist projects their fears and insecurities onto you, creating a reality in which they remain in control and you are destabilized. Manipulation can appear in many forms. It might be as blatant as insistence that events occurred differently than you remember, leaving you doubting your own memory. It might be as subtle as a sigh of disappointment, a look of judgment, or a veiled comment that insinuates your inadequacy. Over time, the constant pressure to measure up erodes confidence, leaving you second-guessing even your most basic perceptions. Imagine, for a moment, a day in your life dominated by this dynamic. You recount a conversation you had with a friend, only to be met with a stern correction that reframes your story. You express frustration at a behavior that hurt you, only to be met with claims of overreaction, sensitivity, or misinterpretation. Slowly, the boundaries between your experience and their narrative blur. You begin to question, am I truly seeing things clearly, or is my reality being shaped by another's ego? This is not just emotional abuse. It is a distortion of reality itself. Jung warns that when one's psychic life is manipulated in this way, the self, the deepest, authentic core, begins to contract, replaced by the shadows of another's ego. You may feel trapped, unable to assert your own perceptions or feelings, constantly navigating a landscape designed to validate someone else while invalidating your own truth. Yet, awareness is your greatest ally. Recognizing the patterns of manipulation allows you to reclaim authority over your perception. Start by documenting your experiences, either privately or with a trusted confidant, so you can anchor yourself in reality. Notice when your emotional responses are being questioned or reframed, and practice reaffirming your truth. Boundaries become essential, psychological, emotional, and sometimes physical. By holding these boundaries, you're not only protecting your sense of self, but also challenging the narcissistic dynamic at its core. Remember, the goal is not to change the narcissist. They cannot change until they confront their own shadow. Your task is to strengthen the bridge to yourself, to reinforce your inner compass, and to reclaim your reality from the distortions imposed by another. In doing so, you transform what was once a prison of manipulation into a sanctuary of self-possession. The fourth sign is perhaps the most bewildering: the cycle of idealization and devaluation. In the beginning, you may have felt as though you had discovered a soulmate, a figure who recognized your uniqueness, who saw you as extraordinary, almost divine. This phase is intoxicating. The narcissist idolizes, adores, and praises you, placing you on a pedestal as though you were the embodiment of perfection. But this pedestal is a fragile illusion. The admiration you receive is not a reflection of your true worth, but a projection of the narcissist's desires, fantasies, and needs. They project onto you the qualities they covet, the image they wish to see. In Jungian terms, this is a projection of the anima or animus, a psychic transfer of the self's energy onto another. It is a powerful, intoxicating experience, but it is also ephemeral. Soon, the mask slips. Small criticisms emerge, growing into coldness, contempt, or outright devaluation. The very person who once praised you may now highlight your flaws, question your intentions, or withdraw affection entirely. This is not an accident. It is a pattern rooted in the narcissist's fear of intimacy. Genuine connection threatens the fragile structure of their persona. If they allow another into their inner reality, their unhealed wounds, insecurities, and vulnerabilities may be exposed. So, instead, they oscillate, lifting you up only to tear you down, keeping you perpetually uncertain, emotionally unbalanced, and reliant on their approval. The emotional impact is profound. You may feel as though you are living in a storm, caught in waves of adoration and rejection, never able to fully relax or trust the constancy of love. The confusion can be disorienting. You may cling to the initial idealization, hoping it will return, while simultaneously bracing for the inevitable devaluation. Over time, this cyclical pattern erodes self-esteem, leaving you questioning your worth and identity. Yet, from a Jungian perspective, this cycle contains an essential lesson: the importance of discernment, awareness, and individuation. Recognizing the pattern allows you to step outside the emotional turbulence, to see the manipulation for what it is, and to reclaim your inner equilibrium. You begin to understand that your value is intrinsic, independent of external validation, and that no one has the right to define your worth. Practical steps include cultivating self-awareness, journaling your experiences, observing patterns without judgment, and strengthening connections with people who honor and respect your true self. By doing so, you insulate your psyche from the turbulence of narcissistic cycles, reclaiming the calm and clarity of your own inner world. To endure a relationship with a narcissist is to wander a wasteland of the soul. The subtle manipulations, the absence of empathy, the hunger for admiration, and the cycles of idealization and devaluation leave an emotional landscape strewn with confusion, isolation, and disillusionment. You may feel invisible, unheard, or as though your very identity is slipping through your fingers. This wasteland is not merely emotional, it is psychic. Jung teaches that the shadow of another, when unrecognized, can cast its influence over your inner life. You may question your reality, your worth, and even your sanity. The narcissist's presence acts like a mirror, reflecting distorted fragments of yourself back, leaving you unsure which pieces are authentic and which are echoes of another's ego. Yet, there is hope. The wasteland is also fertile ground for awakening. By observing these patterns, naming the dynamics, and reclaiming your own perception, you begin the journey of individuation, the integration of the shadow, the conscious embrace of your authentic self, and the reclamation of psychic wholeness. Pain becomes the teacher, confusion becomes a catalyst for clarity, and isolation becomes an invitation to seek genuine, nurturing connection. Recognizing the signs of narcissism is not an act of judgment, it is an act of liberation. Jung emphasized that individuation, the journey to the self, requires courage, the courage to confront both light and shadow, within oneself and in others. Empowerment begins with awareness. Notice the ways your feelings are dismissed, your boundaries crossed, or your story overshadowed. Trust your intuition. It is the compass guiding you back to your authenticity. Establish boundaries, seek relationships that honor your truth, and invest in self-reflection and healing. Your task is not to change the narcissist. They are bound by their unintegrated shadow, but to reclaim your psychic sovereignty. By doing so, you step into a life guided by self-respect, clarity, and conscious choice, rather than manipulation, confusion, or approval-seeking. If this message resonates, know that you are not alone. Share your story, whether publicly or privately. In the sharing of our experiences, we find solidarity, understanding, and the seeds of transformation. Take the steps toward awareness. Observe your emotions, document your experiences, and seek spaces that honor your voice. Begin small, affirm your value, reclaim your narrative, and nurture connections that reflect authenticity. Each conscious step is an act of individuation, a movement toward wholeness, clarity, and self-acceptance. As Jung reminds us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious, by naming the patterns, observing the shadows, and reclaiming yourself. You transform the psychic wasteland into fertile ground for growth. Your journey toward the true self begins with awareness, courage, and the willingness to step into the light of your own consciousness.